In this video, we're going to factor polynomials. So factoring a polynomial is opposite of multiplying. When you multiply your polynomial, you're multiplying terms and combining like terms to condense it down. In factoring, you're doing the opposite, where you're kind of trying to figure out what the simpler terms, the simpler polynomials that were multiplied together originally would be. So in this, we're going to factor out, in our first case, we have 5xy plus 10x squared y. So we're going to factor out anything that we can divide both terms by. So both 5 and 10 can be divided by 5. So I can factor out a 5. Well, they both have at least one x, so I can factor out an x. And they both have at least one y, so I can factor out a y. Okay, I'm going to multiply it by what's left over. So when I factor out 5xy from 5xy, well, nothing's left over, but I have to be able to multiply 5xy times something to end up with 5xy, which would be times 1. So anytime you factor out the entire thing, you leave 1 there, because if you re-multiply, 5xy times 1 is still 5xy. Okay, bring down your operation between, which is plus. All right, I factored out a 5. So 10 divided by 5 leaves me with 2. I factored out one of my x's. Well, x squared divided by x is just x. And I factored out the y, and y divided by y is 1. So I'm left with 5xy times 1 plus 2x. So you can see it's opposite of multiplying, because if I redistribute, 5xy times 1 gives me 5xy times 1 plus 5xy times 2x. 5 times 2 is 10. X times x is x squared. We have the y. So if we redistribute, we should end up with our original answer. So this is our polynomial factored. All right, so let's look at this one. We have 16 and we have 12. So, well, they can both be divided by 2, but they also can both be divided by 4. So if I factor out a 4, let's see, they both have an e. Well, f cubed and f squared, so the largest that we could factor out would be f squared, because they both have at least f squared. Then we have a g and a g, so we can factor out a g. All right, times. So again, think of it as you can divide your original terms by what you factored out to see what's left over. So 16 divided by 4 leaves me with 4. E squared divided by e is e. F cubed divided by f squared is f. And g divided by g is 1. So my g's go away. Bring down that minus. 12 divided by 4 is 3. E divided by e is 1. F squared divided by f squared is 1, and g divided by g is 1. So this is my polynomial factored. As simple as it can get, because I can't factor anything else out to simplify it. All right, so let's see if we can get just a little more complicated. This one's actually not too bad. All right, so we have 7m squared minus m cubed. Well, what do they have in common? Well, they don't have any. This one doesn't have a coefficient. The coefficient would be 1, the number multiplied by the variable, but factoring out 1 doesn't really help us. So we look at the variable part. They both have at least m squared, so we're going to factor out m squared. So I'm left with 7. Well, m squared divided by m squared is 1, so I'm just left with 7 minus m cubed divided by m squared is m. So that one was pretty easy. Okay, so here's one with 3 terms. So you're going to see what you can factor out, what they have in common with all 3. So here we have, I always like to start with the coefficients, the numbers, 64, 48, 16. So they all have in common 16. Okay, so I'm going to factor out 16. They all have at least one x. And they all have at least one y. All right, so 64, so we start by dividing the numbers by 16. So 64 divided by 16 is 4. X squared divided by x is x, and we already do y squared divided by y, so since the y was factored out, we don't have a y there. All right, now bring down that minus. 48 divided by 16 is 3. We factored out the x, and y squared divided by y is y, plus 16 divided by 16 is 1, x divided by x is 1, y divided by y is 1, so we're left with just 1. And that is our answer. So you should have in the parentheses 3 terms because we had 3 terms up here, because when we redistribute, we need to still have those 3 terms. All right, so now this is the part that's just a little more complicated. Right, so you can see it's already kind of partially factored. We have 5 times 3 plus x plus 4x times 3 plus x. So look at what they have in common. So we're looking at this term plus this term. So think of these separately as 2 terms because this 5 is multiplied by the whole 3 plus x. The 4x is multiplied by the whole thing of 3 plus x. So they have 3 plus x in common. So that's what I'm going to factor out. And what am I left with? Well, here it was multiplied by 5 plus, here it was multiplied by 4x. And that is how it's factored, as long as those 2 terms are exactly the same. Okay, over here, well, r plus 2 is the same thing as 2 plus r. Because they're both positive, we can just reverse this. This is the same thing as 4s times r plus 2 minus 7 times r plus 2. So what they have in common is r plus 2 times what's left over. Well, this one was multiplied by 4s minus, this one's multiplied by 7. So this is my polynomial factored. Okay, so if you multiply this out and simplify it, multiply this out and simplify it, you'll get the same answer. All right, now these ones are a little more complex. The reason that they're a little more complex is this one's m minus 3, 3 minus m. So they look similar, but in the first parenthesis, the m is positive, second one's m's negative. First one's negative 3, the second one's a positive 3. So what we can do is if we factor a negative 1 out, dividing everything inside by negative 1, we can get them to be the same. So we have 3n, I'm just going to leave the first one the same, times m minus 3 plus, okay, if I factor out a negative 1, it makes this negative 5 because I'm basically going to divide everything inside by negative 1. It goes back to factoring out what they have in common. And remember, you divide each term by what they have in common. So if I just factor out that negative, there's a 5 already out there. So 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. Okay. 3 divided by, because remember, to factor something out, you see what you can divide everything inside by. 3 divided by negative 1 is negative 3. Negative m divided by negative 1 is positive m. I'm just going to rewrite this. 3n times m minus 3, well, plus negative 5 is just minus 5, times my m is positive and my 3 is negative, so minus 3. So now we have a m minus 3 in both of them. So that's what I can factor out. M minus 3, and what I'm left with, 3n minus 5. All right, that is completely factored. I'm just going to do one more so you get that idea. So again, I can't factor anything out of the parentheses because it's as simple as it can get. There's nothing I can factor both z and 5 by, and this is a z. I'm just going to put a line through it so you don't confuse it with a 2. When I write 2's and z's in math, I do put the line through the z because it's so easy to confuse with a 2, and when you're solving, if you accidentally change it to a 2, well, then your whole answer's wrong. So we're going to get what's inside the parentheses to be the same because we need to reverse this so that both z's are positive and both 5's are negatives, just because I like to mess with the second term. All right, so I'm going to leave the first one the same. 2xy times z minus 5. All right, if I factor out a -1, I have a negative, here if I factor out the -1, I have -9 times -1 is +9. 5 divided by -1 is -5. Negative z divided by -1 is positive z. Okay, so you can see that these are the same thing. You can rewrite it, or you can just say, well, in both of them, I have a positive z and a -5, so z minus 5. And what's left over? Well, this was multiplied by 2xy plus 9. That is my answer. All right, so I'm going to let you try 4 on your own. Go ahead and try them out. You can pause it here, come back when you're ready for the answer. All right, the first one, we're going to factor out 14xy squared. 14 divided by 14 is 1. X squared divided by x is x, and y cubed divided by y squared is y. And if you left it 1xy, that's the same thing as xy. Plus, 28 divided by 14 is 2. X divided by x is 1. Y squared divided by y squared is 1, so we're left with just 2. All right. Here, we can divide everything by 7. And we have m is the smallest m term, n is the smallest n term. So 35 divided by 7 is 5. Factored out the m, we factored out one n, so we're left with an n, minus 49 divided by 7 is 7. We factored out the m and the n, plus 70 divided by 7 is 10. We factored out one of the m's, so we're left with 1, and we factored out the n. All right, then here we have both are multiplied by 7 plus y, so that's what we factor out. What we're left with is 4x plus 5, and that is completely factored. Last one. All right, I'm going to factor out a -1 from that second term, so we have 5e times f minus 3. When I factored out -1, -6 times -1 is +6. And 3 divided by -1 is -3. Negative f divided by -1 is positive f. So here we both have a positive f and a -3. So what they're both multiplied by is f minus 3. If you want to rewrite it in the step below, you can, so you can really see that. And what it's multiplied by, what we're left with, is 5e plus 6. All right, hopefully you were able to factor the polynomials.